Hello and welcome. My name's Alan and I'm the Product Owner Enthusiast, and I'm back once again with more great tips on how to become a product owner. Today I'm going to cover common Scrum terms. There's a fair few of them and it's important to wrap your head around what they really mean. They're not too complicated, but if you don't know, then they're going to throw you. They're going to throw you in your day-to-day role, and they're going to throw you when it comes to interviews. So what I've done is I've grabbed a lecture from my course on Udemy, which is a definitive guide on how to get product owner role, and I've brought that in here for you to enjoy. So once again, sit back, relax, make sure you jot down some notes because there's some really good stuff coming. What I've listed here is some of the key terms that come up and ones that you really want to understand when you're putting yourself forward within interviews and on your CV as well. First off is Scrum itself. So Scrum is an empirical process, a framework of rules, roles, events and artifacts used to deliver projects iteratively. Now that's a really nice sentence, but what does it really mean? Well, a real key word there is empirical. So empiricism is learning through your delivery. It's learning through your experience. Scrum is all about that. Scrum is about delivering stuff regularly and learning from what you have delivered. Learning from the point of view of the Scrum itself and that process and improving upon that process, but also from what you've delivered in the products and getting that immediate feedback and then building upon that. The Scrum framework is a framework. It's not a detailed set of instructions. It's relatively loose and high level, allowing you to fit it into any business situation. It does define some roles, it defines some events and artifacts, but it doesn't get overly specific, allowing different versions and types of Scrum to be implemented in each organization. Sprint. Sprint is a time box activity. This is the period of time where development takes place. Can be up to about 4 weeks as per the Scrum guide recommends, but it's often about 2 weeks long. So just imagine that. This is actually a period of which we've taken requirements in, we've got through the Scrum event or sprint planning, and we are actually going to build, develop, test, and potentially even release at the end of a 2-week sprint. So imagine that, how quickly you're getting new features and functionality out to your customer base every 2 weeks and then learning from it. A really key point about the sprint as well, it should be a sustainable development cycle. And what that means is we're not just working as hard as we can all the time, because your whole team is going to burn out. They're going to start making mistakes and they're not going to be able to keep up the pace. So there may not be any gaps between sprints, but the way in which we work, we should only be taking as much as we can comfortably do within that sprint. And the last one on here is deliver iteratively. Now I've already touched a little bit on this, but what delivering iteratively actually means is delivering bit by bit other than in one big release. So as I've kind of mentioned in the sprint, it's delivering a product in chunks. You deliver in each of those sprints, you could potentially release at the end of each of those sprints, and you build upon it as you go. Through empiricism, you are learning from your customer base. This is very unlike a more traditional waterfall method, where you would maybe build up a load of requirements up front over a couple of months. You would work with solution design for some time, go through development, detailed testing, and maybe eventually release it to the customer 8, 9, 12 months later. Problem is the market changed, maybe some mistakes were made on the requirements up front, other mistakes were made in development, possibly things were missed in testing, meaning the product may not be fit for purpose. The whole point of Scrum is that by delivering iteratively, you're getting it in people's hands sooner and you're getting that immediate feedback. So next, we've got definition of done and definition of ready. Now, definition of done is an agreed upon set of standards the Scrum team can apply to know a piece of work is done and ready for release. Now, think about it this way. The development team has completed all this great work. They put it together. Is it then done at the end of a sprint? Maybe, maybe not. It depends what the definition of done says, because probably that needs testing as well. And actually probably it needs accurate documentation against it too. And then maybe there are a number of other things. Maybe it needs signing off by the product owner as well. All of these requirements for confirming that this work is actually done should be held within the definition of done. And it's very much the checklist against what has been built to ensure that it is ready for release. And also ensures a shared understanding amongst the Scrum team of this. Definition of ready is really similar, and it can be quite confusing at times, but definition of ready is similar in its term, but it's more about the requirement. Definition ready is an agreed upon set of standards for the Scrum team to know a requirement is ready for development. So you think about it when it comes to refinement and sprint planning, you're working through a requirement in refinement sessions and you're getting that user story and acceptance criteria to an acceptable level of quality. You need some sort of standard to know what acceptable means. That's an ambiguous term, and the definition of ready can set that standard. Now, the definition of done and the definition of ready aren't static. They can absolutely change. And like in sprint retrospectives, the team can talk about how to improve and build upon these rules, change them, take things out, put new things in to make sure they are suitable for that Scrum team. Because no one answer is necessarily correct. Next up, we've got the backlog. So this is where all the Scrum team work sits. And it's really important. Like the product backlog is the single source of all the work the Scrum team will do. There's also the sprint backlog, and the point of that is that the elements of the product backlog that have been taken forward in sprint planning for the sprint make up the sprint backlog. Now really that's still all part of the product backlog. They're just the bits that we've taken out for the current sprint. The product backlog is key. It's important that we don't have 5 different places that we're going to grab all the work we're doing, because it'll get confusing and things will get missed and there'll be different standards in how those are maintained. The product backlog is prioritized by the product owner. The product owner is accountable for doing that. And it usually sits on a software system such as DevOps or Jira, which I'll cover in a later lecture. And then there's the sprint goal. So when we get through sprint planning and we start a new sprint, we need to define what the goal of that sprint is. We may have brought in a collection of great requirements and user stories, but what are we trying to achieve with that sprint? And that's something typically the product owner will define, but will agree with the Scrum team. So yeah, it's agreed at planning. The sprint goal is the goal of that sprint. So here's an example. Deliver end-to-end functionality for a user to update their personal details. So that's a really clear goal for that sprint. And the importance of it is that if certain things go wrong, certain blockers and certain requirements that maybe cannot be delivered within that sprint as intended, we could take a look at the sprint goal and consider how else we can achieve that sprint goal. Maybe there is a level of that requirement we could do that would still help us meet that goal. Next, we've got self-organizing. So there are no managers. So we've got the product owner role, we've got the Scrum Master, and you've got the developers. No one of those roles are the managers of the other roles. You've not got someone instructing what everyone else should do. So self-organizing, it refers to a way of thinking in Scrum, and that's a really important way of putting it, is Scrum is very much a mindset. So it's a way of thinking in Scrum that teams should self-manage to problem solve and get the work done. So it's about self-organizing, self-managing yourself to understand what needs to be done. So I'll give you an example. An issue can occur. One of the team members are really busy and you're seeing that on the daily stand-up. The developer can then say, hey, I've actually got some capacity. I can help you out on that. Can I sort of jump in? Or perhaps I'll take something off you and I'll organize this next meeting, or we need a meeting to progress this. No one is telling that person to go organize that meeting. They are taking it upon themselves. They are taking that responsibility to help progress towards the sprint goal. Prioritization. This is the product owner ensuring that the most valuable items are at the top of the product backlog. The product owner is accountable for this and will generally do it. They can delegate it to some degree, but overall the product owner is accountable. They will move various requirements around to ensure that they deliver the most value, and they use multiple criteria to arrive at that. And then finally, velocity. Now, velocity is a term of how much work a team can do. And this is often off the back of like estimating that the Scrum team will do. And it's understanding that, hey, in the last sprint, we got to do X amount of work. So X number of story points, for example, is one way of measuring, estimating effort for each user story. We understand how much we can do over multiple sprints. We take an average, and that is our velocity. And then that basically tells us in sprint planning whether we're taking too much or too little work into that sprint. So it ensures that we keep the work sustainable and that we only take as much as we can do.